Welcome to Africa Pivotal Moments, a podcast where I speak and interact with people in the news who are working at the intersection of journalism and the media sectors, and the technology which impacts both in our increasingly fluid world. Today I'm honored to welcome Professor Robert G Picard, the world's pioneer in media and communications management and the future of media organizations in the digital and AI era. He has written more than 32 books in an illustrious career that has seen him teach at several universities across the world, including Harvard and Oxford. In today's podcast, he speaks on a wide range of issues that are impacting the media industry and journalism, and forecasts a tough road ahead for both, although he does not see the current media organizations and their journalisms being totally replaced by new entrants. It's good evening, Professor Robert Picard from Southern Africa, and good afternoon to you in Boston. Welcome to the program.
It's a great pleasure to be with you, Francis.
I'm honored, in fact, to have you on this program. I mean, you are the pioneer of media economics, who is well known around the world, and indeed of media management. Thank you so much for joining us. How have you been doing? It's been a long time since we met.
Well, it has been far too long, actually, and we need to take care of that at some point.
Yes.
I am keeping busy, and life is treating me very well.
Thank you so much. Maybe we can begin now, looking at the available research as well as from your own observations. Would you say that mainstream journalism and this media institutions are in danger of being subsumed by the journalism of individual personalities and of self-styled social media creators?
Well, there's certainly reason for concern, but individual journalists and social media creators do have limitations. They're not able to provide the range of news and information that comes through the news organizations. They may do well in covering specific types of news topics, foreign affairs, the environment, local institutions, but they have difficulties covering the range of news simply because they are operating as one person or with a very small staff. They also face the big challenge that is facing all news providers, and that is that most people do not regularly view, read, or listen to news at all. And only about 15 to 17% pay for any digital news content. And this means that most people will not read news from mainstream news organizations or from all of these individual journalists, even before you get to the issues of whether or not all the people in the country or the market have digital access. So all of those are factors that are limiting news as a whole. And news has become basically a niche content, not one that's used by all. So are these going to affect? They're going to have some effect. They're going to have effect with people that are interested in a high amount of particular kind of news that a individual journalist might provide on their site. And they will have some effect among people who are not regularly going to news organizations on their own. So the question for news organizations is, how much do they worry about them, and what should they do about them?
Indeed, which leads me to my second question, which is what are these individuals and social media creators doing right, which maybe mainstream media and journalists could copy?
Well, there are certainly some things. As a whole, most of these type of sites and individual journalists are engaging with their audiences in a different way than institutionally produced news. And they really are focusing on news and information that they want most. Now, the first part, news organizations can do something about. They can think about the way that they engage with them in language and the way that they engage with them in podcasts or with other activities along the way. It is difficult for news organizations to provide just the news that audiences are interested in most, because they're dealing with everybody that takes the newspaper, and different people are interested in different things. Some people are highly interested in sports news. Some people are highly interested in local news. Some people are very interested in international news. So all of those kind of things have to be provided by news organizations. But it does leave some room there for specialized content and local content that may not be covered as well in a news organization. I think it's important when you look at their presentation style, it often is less formal and much more conversational than journalistic style. And very often is very person-to-person conversational style. There is certainly some things that news organizations do that could use that kind of style. There is others that are going to have to stay in a more formal style.
Okay, thank you. And maybe the other question is, we're looking at the latest Reuters digital news report, which shows that many audiences, especially the young people, are migrating from obviously traditional media, even from digital media, but to use in particular podcasts and social media. Why are the audiences doing that, and what could a mainstream media do about that?
Yeah, that has actually been going on for almost 50 years in North America and about 30 years in Europe. That you've had declining audiences in print and television news in both cases. And what seems to be happening is that videos, people are very used to video. Particularly young people have grown up in a video world. So that's a natural way of communication for them. They've grown up in a world in which they communicate with each other by video on phones and computers. And so for them, it's very easy to look at those as providing their news interests or needs if they are not interested in a steady, regular diet of news and information that comes from regular news organizations. And the number of people that are interested in spending a half hour or more reading a newspaper or watching a news broadcast has been declining and continues to decline. And that's why many of these other options are replacing them. Even traditional news sources are putting much more video in today than they ever did. They have tried to use social media to mixed effect in most countries, but their websites certainly are now heavy with video because many people like to have the visual as well as the text for what they're watching.
Yes, obviously one of the key challenges of legacy media in particular has been their sustainability. And many people do point to their lack of trust by audiences. What could traditional media do about this serious situation, which is not only affecting the people who are consuming their news, but obviously their financial sustainability?
Yeah, the issue of trust is a very thorny one, and partly because particularly newspapers and broadcast news providers, by necessity, are a major social institution with relations with other major social institutions, including politics and government. And as trust in all social institutions has started to go down, media have also been affected. And certainly there are populists who are leaders who are very willing to criticize traditional media as providing fake news or other such things, and this hurts, obviously. I think one of the things that traditional media need to do is to be more transparent in how they approach news and information, and what it is that they do. They need to be very transparent about their funding, about the philosophies and beliefs behind the way that they cover news and information, and about who they are responsible to. And I don't think that has been done very well by most traditional news organizations. The other thing is that traditional news media tend to want to be authoritative, if you will, and they tell people what is important, and they tell people what to think about. People don't like being told what to do. This is just a real problem with the human condition. They don't want to feel they're being talked down to. They don't want to be told what to think about or how to think about things, and so a lot of the issues that I think are coming with trust issues, if you actually look down into data, really come down to a lot of these really thorny issues of the relationship between the news organization and the people that listen to it and watch it and read it. And I think journalists need to spend some time thinking about that and what they can do about it. It's not an easy fix because it's so deeply ingrained in people's autonomy and the way their relationships with institutions as a whole.
Yes, I think allied to that maybe is the question of who their sources are. You know, when people quote unnamed people who are not known who they are, this tends to impact on the trust as far as audiences are concerned.
And absolutely, and particularly for those people who are not regular viewers or readers, they're quoting people that they may not know, even if they're elected officials. They don't have a good relationship with them others, therefore they are not seen as particularly credible spokespersons when they are talked to. So all of that comes into the big problem of broader trust and understanding of society. And this has gotten more and more difficult as society gets larger and larger and larger, and mass communications has these limitations that other kinds of communications do not, because they're talking to everybody.
Yes. Maybe now if I could turn to the elephant in the room, so to speak, in terms of the advent of generative artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
What would you say will be the long-term impact of Gen AI on the news media, sustainability in particular?
Well, I think we're going to see several things happen. Certainly in the short to midterm, we don't know where the long term is. certainly there's going to be a lot more misinformation appearing everywhere. And mainstream media are really going to need to ensure that the ways they use AI help their credibility and trust, but don't harm it by giving misinformation. And there have been a number of very strong cases in different parts of the world in the last year where huge mistakes and misinformation were given out because traditional media used AI. The biggest challenge, I think, is that most AI sources are taking materials from news producers without compensating them for them. This, of course, harms them financially. It also reduces the place of the news organization in the ecosystem of information because it takes it out of them and replays the information as if the AI were providing it. And so that is all of those are very harmful institutionally to news media along the way. So
there is a company calling itself Cloudflare, which I noticed is saying that it has developed a system which can prevent this from happening, or at the very least, the developers of these AI tools should compensate the originators of the content. Your comment on that?
what things like Cloudflare are doing, and there's some other technologies that are being used also within company web operations, essentially stop AI from coming in and getting to the content and scraping all that content. And that doesn't really bring any money into it, but it does reduce what might be lost along the way. And so there are some things that are important when we're seeing that being done. I think really, I mean, you're seeing some places look very heavily at their copyright law and are applying it to the uses of AI by scraping content. You see others that are trying to make it illegal to scrape content. All of those are struggling in a long way to deal with the issue of AI. Personally, I really think that AI companies should pay journalists. I mean, this is a moral issue. Creators should be paid for anything that they produce. That's whether it be journalism, whether it be art, whether it be sculpture, whatever. The problem is how to do it and how to make it work. And copyright protections differ in every country of the world. And we need some mechanisms in there to deal with that along the way. And I think these protective softwares are more likely to lead to some AI firms saying, let's make a deal with the media companies.
Yes. Okay, but also there are lots of other issues or challenges posed by artificial intelligence. I mean, the issue of their biases because they are developed by the West, Secondly, they don't take into account the issues of different languages and cultures across the world. Of course, we are aware of their hallucinations and so on and so on. What do you think could be done in terms of maybe improving the deployment of these AI tools working in conjunction with established media?
Well, I think this is an ongoing problem that's been a problem with news and information as a whole for decades, having been dominated by Western sources, and it only gets better when sources in regions and nations work to understand what is happening there, and either can have their own AI or can create an AI for all the news creators in their nation so that it's pulling from them. Or when the people that are using it are very careful with what the results are and say, okay, we've got this from them. Now let's look at it and see, is this particularly biased in a way we can understand it to be biased, in which case fix it before it's used on the air or in a newspaper.
Yes. Excuse me. I see that, some of these chat bots are increasingly being used now to obviously search for news, access news by audiences. Where does that leave search or the viability of search by companies such as Google and so on?
Yeah, there are a lot of people that actually think search is dead. And a lot of people in the tech industry are really concerned about that the traditional ways we search, the traditional ways that search are funded, all of these are actually endangered by the AI movement. So it is a it is a topic of concern to an awful lot of people. Clearly, it's easy. I think it certainly will take search for news out of the picture very quickly. It doesn't seem to be taking search for other kinds of information that's not in news and information, that's not in news and information sources in the same kind of way, and is looking more at more public sources for other kinds of information. We will certainly see. There's a lot of concern by authors. There are a lot of concern by television journalists and others about ways that it's being used that can very, very much hurt them.
Journalism seems to be under siege under the conditions which we are looking at now, indeed, even the sustainability of mainstream media. How do you see these two sectors moving forward, maybe looking at it in the near and maybe long term? Mm-hmm. I'm asking you because you have followed this field, you started it, you have followed it. I'm just wondering how you see the future of both traditional journalism as well as of mainstream media institutions.
Well, no one really knows what's going to happen in the future. So journalists and news organizations really have to take a strategic and very adaptive approach. I mean, they've got to be positioned so that they can respond to what's going to happen or what might happen. And so there are some expected changes that we expect in the near term in the next few years as a result of this. And I think they need to be ready to respond to those. But there's going to be some new technologies and audience behavior coming along that we may not even be able to understand now. And we're just beginning to understand AI and where it's going to go. So you're going to have to, as a news organization, a journalist, be attuned to what is happening. I think also there's an issue that many journalists and other people in media forget that no new media has ever killed off a previous media. They're all still there. They've had to change. Their audiences have altered. Their revenues have been altered. The kind of services they provide have been altered. How they position in the whole media mix has been altered. You remember the days when radio was dominant, and now it's not so much dominant anymore. But they are serving different purposes, acting in different ways along the way. And so certainly as things continue, we expect that there are going to be more changes in the traditional media along the way. And I think as people that are managing mainstream journalism production companies, they're really going to have to continually adjust to all the changes that are going to come. And that means first that they got to really follow and understand what changes are taking place, and not wait until they take place and then respond. You've got to see it ahead of time and kind of move a little bit with it. And you need to find ways to benefit from changes. And there are many companies that have benefited from the changes that are out there, and that have happened as a result of digital media, for instance. But what that means is that as a firm, you've got to be agile and willing to adapt and innovate. Some still are not. Some still say, oh, this is the way we've done journalism for 200 years. We want to still do it. Or professional journalism for about the last 125 years or so. You just can't be wedded to what the operations are currently or what it was in the past. You want to learn from those. You want to hang on to some of your history, but you really have to be there and be willing to move away. This is really difficult because you got to maintain your current operations and products. They are, especially when they provide the bulk of your funding. And so you've got to be very careful in doing that. You just don't throw that out. But over time, that's going to become less and less part of your revenue. And you're going to have to find ways to replace that revenue with other activities. I think the biggest thing we're seeing in journalism today is that almost all companies, particularly in the West, and a lot of startups in the rest of the world, are really relying on hybrid funding. Instead of having just money from audiences or money from advertisers, they might now have 4 or 5 and even more different sources of revenue coming in. They might be selling a newsletter. They might be having events. They might be having some philanthropy that's helping them out. And you got to find a variety of ways to put that together and make yourself in a better position. One thing that we are seeing now that's quite interesting is some large news organizations are creating licensing deals with some of the AI firms. And so you have things like Associated Press is working with Google and OpenAI. You've got Reuters with Meta and Microsoft. Agence France Presse is working with Mistral. I mean, a lot of things are happening right now saying, okay, let's not have you just scrape, but give us something for doing that. And then we can talk, because they can try to estimate what they're losing from that and be able to find a better way to survive financially.
That was Professor Robert Picard. We thank you so much for those insights. Thank you and good night.
Good night. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
And that was Professor Robert G Picard, the world's pioneer in media economics and media management, speaking to me on the challenges and prospects for mainstream news media and journalism. I thank him for his critical contribution to the discourse of an industry increasingly under siege in the era of generative artificial intelligence. Thank you for listening to the program. Be good and stay kind always. Until the next episode, goodbye.